G'day and welcome. This podcast is nothing more than as it says. Three blokes sharing their love of whiskey, having a laugh, and most importantly, having a crack. So grab your glass, your favourite whiskey, and kick back and enjoy our podcast. Please remember to not drink and drive, over 18s only, and as always, know your limits and drink responsibly. Remember, alcohol should be enjoyed and appreciated, never abused. Now, time to kick off the pod.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the main event of the evening.
Welcome back to another edition of Having a Crack with Big Mac, Jono and Roscoe. And for this episode, we have ventured out to the lovely Distillery in Somerville. Chief Son's Distillery, in fact. And we pick up this interview with the head distiller, Stuart and Naomi. Here it is. Ladies and gentlemen, we are joined here today on a special edition of the podcast for Having a Crack with Big Mac, Roscoe and Jono, and we have with us some Australian whiskey royalty today. Now, Stuart and Naomi from Chief Son Distillery in Somerville have joined us. Welcome.
G'day guys, how are you?
Very good.
Hi, welcome.
How's everything been going in the wonderful world of whiskey with yourselves?
It's been great. So it's going fast. We're selling plenty of whiskey. We've got lots of people coming and visiting the distillery door after a nice 2-year little break that we all took.
Yep.
So it's awesome to have people back drinking our whiskey, talking all things whiskey.
Fantastic. We did have a bit of a mini tour before ourselves, didn't we, boys?
Yep, we did. It was very nice of you to take us through and show us your setup here.
Pleasure guys. It's great.
And the facilities are also excellent down here. The upstairs little area that have the whiskey, there's tasting rooms, they do everything. It's spectacular and, yeah, credit to them. Great.
And we want to get into a bit of a background on how Chief Son Distillery started out. So, Stuart and Naomi, I'm going to field some questions to both of you. So, the first one. So basically a background on yourselves and what you were doing occupation-wise prior to starting this magnificent distillery.
I'm going first, fantastic. So, yes, Stuart here. We've both got interesting backgrounds, and some people say, how does it correlate to becoming distillers? But there's a lot of unique skills we bring. So I was an ex-army officer, so I did quite a long time in the regular army, blowing stuff up, which was fantastic, which we still maintain the connection. So we still do a lot of defence work and a lot of support there. And then we both developed a big finance company. So we ran, in the legal space, kind of companies and trusts and that sort of thing, which was a lot of hard work. But in fact, that was actually the cash cow that then built the distillery. So it was the day-to-day funding, and that was production and then ultimately staff and everything. So fortunately we sold that business in 2018, which allowed us to become full-time distillers, but we already had stock that was nearly 5 years old.
Okay.
4 years old.
Yeah. So I do have a degree in science from many decades ago, and then also moved into IT. And then obviously finance. So between Stuart and myself, we really have a great catalogue of skills that you need in running and owning your own business. And then we work together to learn how to make whiskey. So we have worked together for a really long time, and we still manage to be married and still like each other. So that's pretty good going, I reckon.
Well, considering we went to primary school together. It's been a couple of years now, so.
Very nice. And what was it about whiskey that drew you both in to want to get into that field? So you mentioned the occupations previously, but what was it that drew you both into there specifically for that reason?
It's interesting because we often say 12 odd years ago, we didn't even know what whiskey was made of. So I'm a Macintosh, so obviously flows through the blood anyway. But I was actually in 2011, Chivas Regal ran a whiskey competition. And the whiskey competition, 2 parts to it, but the main part was a 25-word or less competition, why you should go to Distillery Distillery in Scotland. And so we bought 3 bottles, and Naomi made me, my dad, and herself enter the competition, of which Dad won it.
Wow.
So he won the 25-word, and that's why on the wall as you walk in on the right there, you'll see Dad's 25 words, which I guess we now call a foundation statement. It's not just his words, because his were this intergenerational thing about whiskey. So he wrote, my grandparents passed the love of whiskey through my parents to me, and I want to make sure my children pass on to their children. So that was his 25 words. So really, we then toddled off overseas and really were immersed in the whiskey making for 2 weeks. And it was really from that we then came back and set up a test bed. We played. Nay's science kind of corrected all the rubbish I was trying to do. And then ultimately, as a couple of primary school buddies, we decided we'd try our hand at commercial distilling. So we bought this place, 8 years ago. I've been commercially distilling for 7 and selling whiskey now for a bit over 3 years. So it's been a hell of a journey. So that's kind of the origin that got us involved and interested. But without the science background, without the finance business we had, we couldn't have done it. So
there's a lot of pillars that really go into making a distillery, and a successful one at that as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. There's so we did have grand illusions that perhaps we could keep our finance company as well as having a whiskey distillery. So we could manage that until it came to marketing, and now we're not marketers at all, and realised very quickly that marketing was going to be a full-time job. So hence we got rid of the finance company.
Yeah,
which was a good decision, absolutely. So there's a lot of moving parts to having a whiskey distillery. So unfortunately, you do move very quickly out of making the whiskey and that excitement to the reality of then selling it and bottling it, making sure you got enough corks, right, Stuart?
yes,
Enough
we ran out of
bottles.
corks once, yes, absolutely.
Oh, did I mention that? Sorry.
no, fantastic. And what sort of so you touched on that you went over to Scotland. You were able to sort of gain specific inspiration, I suppose, from that trip as well, to transform that into what you've produced here today as well. Where do you sort of envision the next sort of 5 to 10 years with Chief Sons as well?
Yeah, great question. So we, during that sort of business phase when we were developing the distillery, we defined lots of things. So we defined the recipes, the processes, but it was also business planning. It was around what we thought strategically the industry would be in that 5 to 10 years. So we're still tracking down the same strategy, and that is you need to be a fairly big distillery to survive. You need to export, and the whole pile of principles we developed. And so we're still pursuing that. So we are growing continuously. So we quadrupled production, 2 years ago? And that's about putting high-quality, consistent whiskey down. And so it's not just a volume-based game. If you produce more, though, it does get some economies of scale. But we're not after the economies. We're after trying to produce consistent high quality and price-driven. So our aim, though, is to produce a certain volume of whiskey. So the new facility that we'll touch on, I'm sure, has to be a lot bigger, but it has to basically sustain the current production rate. And so for us to step up, from to a silly amount of bottles, it's not necessary for us. So we're one of Australia's largest family-owned and operated whiskey distilleries, and so that was part of the business plan, was to make sure we were big enough to be able to export, but also sustain production through the major chains. Yep. So if you don't do that, if you don't export, so it's about sustaining that rather than working themselves to death. And that's the issue here. Is it's very hard to run a distillery. So and we love it, but so the future's more about sustaining high quality, consistent whiskey permanently.
Beautiful. And Naomi, question for yourself as well. this is definitely a science-driven question, I reckon, as well. So with the ever-growing whiskey offerings out there in Australia, and even more specifically some in Victoria as well, what separates yourselves from the others out there in terms of the processes? Is there a specific one thing that separates you, or is there multiple offerings that you do here that tries to make it slightly different?
I think for us, there is some. I think all Australian whiskey is great, and it's great to see that industry and that growing. I think the more Australian whiskey is available, the more consumers are going to buy into it, the more we're all going to benefit from it. For Chief Son, as we said earlier, we're very malt driven. So one of the things that does set us apart is that we do have our 3 different base spirits that we're making. First, just one base spirit, and then aging in multiple barrels, which a lot of distilleries do. We're actually the opposite. We've got 3 different base spirits and then generally aging in the same barrel type. So we are going for that consistency, and I think that gives us a point of difference. And it means that we have a range of whiskies, of different flavoured whiskies for people to try, and we really are heroing that malt flavour coming through our whiskey.
Beautiful. So when there's aspects of the I suppose you'd call it spirit industry, where everyone's trying to invent and create something that's completely different every week, every month, how do you as a business flex to that and try and add an additional option to make yourselves unique?
I'll cover off on that because, our guiding principles are high quality and consistency. Yep. So we like to say in our tasting room we have 3 different tastings. 2 of them are high quality, consistent whiskies. The third one is where we play. And so part of the business case behind being big was making sure those consistent whiskies are made all the time. So it's the only way you can sell internationally or to majors or even the independents. But where we play is a lot of fun. And that's where we have unique casks. We have cask expressions, which we finish whiskey in beer barrels. We do all sorts of... So I think, in the future, it's fun to have things you play with, but we need that consistency for the Australians to believe in it, and we need good prices so the Australians can afford it. So that's where we've always focused, and but we do love our plays as well.
Fantastic. So a slight little break from the questions just for a tick. We're going to jump in to the tastings here in front of us, which we have the Tannist, the 900 standard 45%, the 900 pure malt 45%, and the 900 sweet peat 45%. So I'm going to pass to Stuart and Naomi to run us through these delicious tastings.
Awesome. Well, I think I should comment though, because you said 900, 900, 900, which is quite correct. I think just so everyone is aware of why we're called Chief Son, and then Naomi can touch on the Tannist. But basically, 900 years ago, in the early 1100s, the King of Scotland, like you mentioned royalty here, so the King of Scotland, or the Chief of Alba, as he was called at the time, awarded our family the surname Mackintosh for fealty in battle, so for fighting for successive kings of Scotland. So when we came to name the distillery, we simply flipped our surname around, which is, in Scottish Gaelic, it said Vic Untashik, and it means son of the chief. So hence we became Chief Son. So that's why, and hence the 900 reference to the family history as well. So
okay,
that's why we're Chief Son, and that's why 900.
So on that note as well, with the emblem that you've got on there, so the choice behind that as well, that's all stems back through there as well, or is
that's a bit different actually. But it all means something. So, and I'll comment on this because it's all about Naomi. And so basically, having known each other forever, we realised that we'd made a brand that was all about me and my family, all Mackintosh, all Scottish based. And so Naomi's not only a science nerd; she loves birds, and so the bird is a white-bellied sea eagle, which is a predominant bird of prey here on the peninsula. So it kind of gives you that coastal location. It's designed to look like our still down the middle, but with a broad family foundation. And a Scottish chief traditionally wore 3 feathers in the bonnet to denote rank. There's only 3 feathers either side, reflecting 2 family lines. And so it's designed, so we've got the Mackintosh name, we've got the bird, which kind of unites Naomi and I into the brand. And as co-founders and owners, that's really important.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so Yeah, and actually from our back deck, we actually get to see eagles. They live on the escarpment, so it's a really nice thing, sipping the whiskey and looking at the eagles.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
That's good.
So the Tannist that you've got in front of you.
Yes.
This whiskey we actually launched in September 2020. Our first whiskey was the 900 Standard. But the Tannist we introduced because our whiskies are generally a big, creamy whiskey, and we felt that we needed a gateway whiskey into our range. So we've come up with the Tannist. Now, the Tannist is the heir apparent to the chief. So it's not necessarily the firstborn or the first boy or first girl. It is whoever can show the characteristics in order to be the chief. So that's why we've called it the Tannist. It's not yet big enough to be the chief. So I describe this as our double wood. So this whiskey's actually been aged in a French oak ex-sherry barrel and a American oak ex-bourbon barrel and married together. This whiskey I describe it as super easy to drink, and hopefully when you taste it, you do get a wild honey flavour coming through. People look at me sideways when I say this, but it does remind me of when I was a kid. I grew up in the Blue Mountains, and you would bite off the end of the grevillea flower and suck the honey out, and I definitely get that honey flavour coming through.
That's sensational.
It's designed to be kind of two whiskies in one. So what we found was we needed to create a recognisable Scotch entry. And so the American oak gives you that honey, citrus and vanilla, that what we're used to drinking. And then the DNA of the brand kicks in, which is that French oak sherry kind of bigger whiskey. So it's kind of a nice ramp into the brand.
And you truly are getting, boys, you both tasted yours as well, you truly are getting that perfect balance across the board of the honey, the floral, sweeter notes in there as well. Everything's covered.
Yeah, no, it tastes great, and it's got a real sort of soothing effect, I feel, on yourself.
Medicated.
You just feel calm and relaxed as soon as you take that first sip of it.
I love that you've said that, because we really talk about whiskey being a slow drink and really, sharing it between family and friends, and like you do sit down and really enjoy it and have that connection with people over a whiskey.
It's super sweet, and like you get that, it's a wild honey, really, you mentioned it, and it's right there, especially once someone talks you through the drink, you can see the layer that's there and the taste. It's a brilliant drink. Happy with that.
It's probably a good point to raise, because we often get people quite confused around, have you put wild honey in it? And the answer is no. It comes so we reckon about half of the flavour of our whiskey comes from the process. So the malt, the distilling. The other half comes from the barrel. And so when we talk about it's got wild honey and Grandma's Christmas pudding, we clearly don't push it in there. It's actually extracted from the barrels. So this one, the two different oaks particularly, give it quite distinctive flavours.
Yeah, so our 900 Standard.
We better pour some for ourselves.
Yeah.
These guys are all organised, we're not.
So our 900 Standard is our flagship whiskey, the one that we make the most of, and we talk about. So we called it Standard because it's our standard of whiskey. I do say that it is also a nod to Stuart's military history. The Standard is the flag that the troops rally to, so we want it to be the whiskey that you rally to with your family and friends. So this whiskey is the same recipe as the Tannist, but only aged in a French oak barrel. So you're really getting that sensation of what the barrel is doing to the whiskey. And this one is... We've knocked out that honey and that citrus and vanilla flavours, and now it's more about Grandma's Christmas pudding. We say caramelised flavours, butterscotch coming through. So nice, big, creamy, really enjoyable whiskey.
And you've noted on here as well, this whiskey in particular has picked up a few awards.
It has.
Yeah, that's an old sheet. There's a few more awards.
A few more awards.
Well, 95% of the whiskey we make is standard.
Yep.
So whether it's the general vatting, so we combine barrels and batches to create consistency, or whether it's single casks of the 900 Standard, which often have unique characteristics. So we won't play with those today, but the single casks can create completely different whiskey. Because, like Naomi said, it's science putting the whiskey into the barrel, but the barrel then has a mind of its own. So it's really an art form getting it out. And so that's Yeah, so we win a lot of awards for our standard, but it's also the things we've done with the standard. So it might be cask expression or single casks or stuff like that.
Yep. Notes on these ones, boys. You're picking up a few things.
Gone to sleep down there, haven't they? Lovely time. Over-relaxed.
Really enjoyed it.
Oh, we're just enjoying some whiskies.
So the nose notes that we've got here as well. So it's got sweet fruit, sherry, and roasted nuts, baked toffee, and warm butterscotch, complex sweet leather and oak. So there's quite a fair bit of variety, but I reckon it's definitely hit on the nutty sort of flavour. I reckon I'm picking up on at the start. With the taste, we've got full sherry, balanced oak, and sweet barley, oily complex with late caramelised peat. And the peatiness, I think I do pick up on a bit of that towards the end as well.
So most of our whiskies do have a small amount of peated malt, and it's not to make it smoky, it's actually to lengthen the palate. So early days of test bed, we'd found the French oak with peat created this long toffee. So that's why most of them do have it. But it's interesting, I was just looking at the glass and the viscosity in this light. So our still and our systems are designed to create this style of whiskey, big, fat, oily whiskies, and that's as simple as you can say it. So our still allows a lot of the fats, the oils, and the congene, as they're called, flavour molecules to come through, where if we had a fine, different still, of course, you'd create a different spirit. So we've always wanted to create a whiskey that's it's thick, it's got long texture, mouthfeel, flavour to it. So yeah, we're pretty chuffed with our 900 standard because that is what we do.
It is a very nice whiskey, and it's not aggressive on the mouth, so it's very nice going down. And yeah, I do get that little tiny bit of peat coming through. Yeah, it's very nice.
Yeah, I'd say it has a sweet finish at the end there. It's definitely got that caramelised sort of sense at the end, and the peat is nicely like a medium finish at the end. I'd suggest it's very well drinking whiskey. Certainly very good. Especially
for a 45% as well. There is some whiskies you can try from time to time around that 45 that come across real harsh. This has none of those characteristics whatsoever. It's just really, really perfectly balanced. So, yep, that's a beautiful one. All right, now on to the next one.
Next one or next question?
Next question.
Oh, let's go next question.
Yeah, you can do next question.
Because otherwise, I can't drink this fast. It's quite funny owning a distillery, and both Naomi and I are terrible drinkers.
Yep.
Where, we might have 2 whiskies in a night and we go, oh, I don't feel so good anymore. So it's kind of a driving force, though. So we only want to drink really good quality whiskey. We've always been that way. So if it comes home as a test bed and out of here and we don't like it, then it doesn't get bottled. So it's only the whiskey that we both think is up to spec that we actually bottle.
That's all right. You're saving yourself a few barrels of special whiskies.
The coolest thing we have ever done was before we went commercial, we ran the small still for 8 months, and it filled 1 barrel. And that barrel created 125 bottles, and that's the chief. That's the barrel that is just for our family. The thing we realised the other day is that 125 bottles, only for births, deaths and marriages, will last our family over 100 years. And that's the romance in this game as well. So that's the special barrel. But other than that, we have 3 kids. We have Kira, Aiden and Cameron, and they, every January, fill their own barrels. They're not. They think it's for them. It's not for them, but it's part of the future. So that's exciting, and that is a big event every January where the kids graffiti on the back of the barrels and get a bit out of our hands sometimes. But just to see the maturity of the kids. So Kira was 6 when she filled her first one. I just remember her writing, "I love Mum and Dad and dolphins." Her last one, I can't use a name, but it was all about who's a hottie at school. Because she's now in high school, and so it's a great evolution, and it's a great thing to have in the family, is these romantic barrels that are for us.
And I think that each of them did write "COVID sucks."
Yep, along with a lot of us, I reckon.
Yep.
Fantastic. And curious question as well, how many staff members are there within Chief Son as well?
So there's 11 at the moment.
11?
Yep. And that covers everything from sales through marketing, distribution, through production, reception, everything. So, yeah, but everybody is so multi-hatted, you wouldn't believe it. Like it's, you don't know what you're doing in a day and you come in and all of a sudden you're bottling. because that's the priority, or we've got big ore. So it's all hands to the pump, and that makes it a hell of a fun place to work when you don't know what you're going to do next.
And did it start out initially, was it obviously just yourselves and one other, and then you had to sort of grow bit by bit by bit?
Yeah.
So it would have been pretty full on those early days?
It was. So, yeah, there was Stuart and I and Stacey, actually. She worked with us in our other company, and we said, we're starting a whiskey distillery. Do you want to come with us? And she's like, sure. What am I going to do? We went, we don't know. The job description was very broad. It was like whatever needs to be done, it just has to get done. So
it's now a bit more defined, and to be honest, we're just about to employ 3 more people because we just, as you grow, the pain, you're trying to stretch staff too thin, so it's a good evolution.
Fantastic, and just a question as well. I just noticed on our little tasting page that we've got here, it's got a chart where you've got a variety of different notes that depict these whiskies in particular. What would be your draw card for a profile that you specifically like? Are you both the same, or would you one of you prefer sweetness, the other one prefer floral? Like, what's your biggest draw card that you like?
It's a great question. We both have very similar palate. I'd say, except one thing I will note. So we obviously bottle at both bottle and cask strength, and the difference composition is massive. So a full fat whiskey is your cask, and then your skinny is your lower strength. And all the ladies in this place all like the cask strength. So the big difference is not style, but it's actually strength, because the ladies all love the higher strength and the big mouthfeel and texture, whereas all the boys here like the lower strength. And it doesn't mean anything in particular, it's just a profile of how we've found people.
I mean, it means that you're not weak?
No, we're just a little bit softer than... But I mean, we all prefer the higher strength, but I would dial it down anyway. So I'll add a bit of water to most whiskies just to open it up and experience the flavours rather than the alcohol. That's how I kind of deal with it. But it's a good segue into the next whiskey, though. I can answer it a couple of ways, because the next whiskey, the 900 Pure Malt, is my favourite whiskey in the distillery. And sometimes we have varying different ones. But the Pure Malt was designed to create a whiskey that tastes just like malted barley, and that was it. And so we really enjoy making the Pure Malt. It's a very expensive whiskey to make, because our efficiency when we're trying to create this whiskey is just ridiculously low. So, instead of getting your 400 litres per tonne, we only get 80 litres of alcohol when you make the Pure Malt. So it's got a crystal malt in it, which is essentially caramelised sugars, so it doesn't have any fermentation. But it's a pure batch of itself as well. So the design to create this malt flavour really becomes a discrete or a pure batch. So when you nose this whiskey, it's all about lollies, toffees, barley. And drinking it, it's nowhere near as sweet as it smells, but it's all about this amazing crisp spirit. It's about sort of poached peaches. It's and obviously a lot of malt and biscuit and baked stone fruit in there. So it's definitely one of my favourite whiskies, or the favourite whiskey we make here.
And it's always a favourite day when we are distilling this whiskey as well, because the distillery definitely smells like banana lollies.
We'll have to pop down that day, I reckon, Roscoe. It smells fantastic. It really does, doesn't it? You're getting one of those notes on there?
Yeah, they're coming through.
It's a fun whiskey. We only do it every 10th batch, so we only do it twice, 2 to 3 times a year, basically. But it's a wicked whiskey.
And you were saying what you do a run every 2 weeks?
Yeah, sometimes we do every week, but that kills us because it takes. We did a manpower study here on distilling, and actually to run the still for 4 days and then barrel and all the bits that go with it, it's actually 2 weeks of manpower. So it's a lot of work. So that's why we've spaced it out so we can have a life as well. So generally we just distill on, distill off week by week.
Yep, that's right. So further on from this whiskey as well, so where did this sort of fall in line in terms of your production? So was this the third whiskey that you'd produced out of the range as well?
They all kind of happened together. So in the
Okay.
test bed, we developed the sequence that we follow, and that there's scientific reasons why we follow this process. And it's got a lot to do with peat phenols and retention in tanks. And so there's actually a scientific process that we follow, and that makes sure they're more consistent as we go. This one, then we generally do, on the back of this, we do the sweet peat, which is your next whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
That one does taste really good as well.
For me, I think the pure malt, it's probably the smoothest
Yep.
out of the ones we've had. It just seems like I know smooth's a word that you can't really use to describe something other than it just being nice, but yeah, it's just sort of almost velvet, the way that is just a drink that coats your tongue, feels really nice. It's got that earthy maltiness sort of to it, but it's still sweet, as you mentioned as well, that it's sweeter on the nose than probably what it is drinking, but yeah, definitely a smooth drink.
I describe it a bit like a breakfast whiskey, is what I say. And for me, I feel like it's a very up and down whiskey. Like, it's not really wide in your mouth, and that's what I say to people that come in. Like, if you don't like whiskey, please try this whiskey, because it doesn't have those characteristics that non-whiskey drinkers probably don't like.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt the throat going down.
It doesn't hurt. Like, it's not wide in your mouth. It's a beautiful whiskey, I think. Yeah.
Did you mention bananas before on the taste of Yeah, 100% getting that.
Yes, absolutely.
That's the thing that's lingering in my mouth the whole time now. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, and then when you pair that obviously up with saying that it's very much a breakfast whiskey as well, it's bang on.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah. Have it with your cornflakes.
Yeah. Rice bubbles.
Nutri-Grain over here.
Fantastic.
Nutri-Grain malt, that kind of works.
There you go. Yeah, that was his No, very good.
It's interesting. I touched on the efficiency before, and it's probably a good point, because I think a lot of Australians don't. Sorry, not offensive. A lot of Australians don't understand what craft whiskey is. As much as we kind of hate the term craft, because it's kind of used for everything these days, there's so many inefficiencies you can embrace to create craft spirit. So we say we could have created a Scotch-like product. It'd have to be called something different, obviously. We can be very efficient. We could produce high volume, cheaper whiskey. But we choose not to, and we change variables like the efficiency of malt. So if you want to make a lot of whiskey, you use very efficient malt with a hugely high sugar content, no taste. So we kiln our core barley when we're malting it. We kiln it to a sort of a mid-craft beer range. So you shouldn't use it to make whiskey because there's not enough yield out of it, but it's got so much flavour in it. So when you look at a craft product, we don't want to make cheap whiskey. We want to make whiskey that's got texture, flavour, character to it. Likewise, we could use American oak barrels. They're only a third of the price. Well, partly because they're a third of the age of a French oak. But we come from this great wine country, so we leverage off the back of the wine industry by having really good French oak ex-sherry barrels. But they cost 3 times more. So, again, just understanding that, whiskey's not about trying to create efficiency or price in this country. It's about trying to create great quality, unique whiskies. And that's what a single malt whiskey is. It's single distillery, malted barley, but it's actually a character. It's a character that only us can produce anywhere on the planet.
You were talking about the malt. So did you go through a lot of experimentation with different malts, and do you remember how many?
A lot. We've got the original logs, but we were incredibly lucky to engage so many amazing people. One of them, unfortunately, has passed away, but Grant Powell was Powell's Maltings, and up in Mordialloc, and him and one of his sons, Michael, they developed the maltings that we use now. And so he lived near us, so every other day he'd drop off another sack and say, try this, and try that. We go, no, not right. And so it took us probably a bit over a year, really, to create the right malt. And so our malt is specific to us. It's now called Powell Malt, even though it's now made by Voyager Malt up in the Riverina. But it's the same schedule for malting. So absolutely family connections. We've had so many great families contribute to the distillery, and Grant Powell was one of the guiding lights, considering he'd worked in the malting industry for 50 years. And so what he didn't know. So absolutely, it's very specific. Everything we've done here has been done by real people. So that's pretty cool.
And following on that note, for great stories as well, you alluded to us before on the tour the amount of barrels that you obviously carry within this distillery here and the other premises you have as well. Now, with picking the right barrels, you did mention with the bourbon barrels that you had before as well, you got a Maker's Mark barrel and...
Buffalo Trace and Jack Daniels.
So is there specific reasons? Because obviously I've heard a few distilleries and breweries have used those specific distilleries or their barrels from overseas as well. Is there a reason behind that for just them instead of any other brands or labels? Is it because volume of production that they've got enough to use, or is the flavour notes coming through the reason?
So the JD barrels, they were interesting. They were kind of given to us, and we went, let's give them a try, and they've created a stunning whiskey. But the other ones, they were selected. So we kind of knew how they produce their spirit, and so they're not all ready yet, by the way, but it does create a different whiskey for sure, each one of them. So you just have to understand what that distillery is doing and how long they're using them for. And it's also about quality of the actual oak, because we don't want to use them just once. We generally use our barrels 3 times. So some, because they're a single-use item for the bourbon industry, some of them are really poor quality. They're good for one use, but other than that, they fall apart. So it's a longevity aspect.
Okay, so now we're going to get on to the 900 Sweet Peat, 45% as well. So, Stuart?
Yeah, I'll cover on this.
Yep.
So this is Naomi's favourite whiskey on this lineup as well. So our aim here, so you kind of note everything has a reason. So the Tannis was a consumer demand whiskey. The 900 Standard is all about history. We can kind of cover off on that, but it's all about how whiskey used to be made. The pure malt, that's all about malted barley. And the aim with this was to create a soft, floral, buttery peated whiskey. So people often come and go, oh, it's going to be like a Lafroig or a Lagavulin. It's not. It's actually sweet peated. So it's, I guess, for those that don't understand how peat gets in your whiskey, it's actually smoked into it. So when they're malting the barley, you get barley off the farm, you steep it or wet it, you let it germinate, which, unless you're a scientist, basically creates the sugars. And then you've got to dry it. So in a peat case, it's actually dried over a smoky peat fire, and so that's very traditional. Where you originate your peat source from, that matters. So if it's an Isla kind of peat, then it's going to burn the sulphur, the iodine kind of medicinal notes into your malt. This is actually one of 3 ingredients we import. So we import this from the Highlands of Scotland. And it's all about flowers, grass, and trees. So, hence, when it's burnt to dry the malting barley, you get all this soft floral kind of earthy component, not that sort of salty medicinal. So this whiskey's all about that butter. And so it's soft, floral, buttery. It's really, really easy drinking whiskey, and it's just mellow. But if you guys pop a couple of drops of water into your whiskey after this, you'll see why we call it sweet peat. It's a bit like the Great Sandy Desert. It's great, big, and it's sandy. This stuff is called sweet peat because, particularly when you dial it down, you're going to get a lot more of the malt, a lot more of that peat, and a lot more of the sweetness that you get out of this whiskey.
Oh, it's even pretty good without the few drops in it.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. But we're about educating here. And a lot of people we get here don't even know that whiskey's made of beer, because that's essentially what we do. We make a beer, we distill it twice and put it in a barrel. Sounds really easy, doesn't it? It's not quite as easy as that, but yeah, this one's really unique and different. So yeah, enjoy the sweet peat. You find much different. Most people will find if you put the right amount in, it actually makes it stronger or richer.
So you raise a good point there, and we've mentioned this on the podcast a few times now as well, where we've been trying whiskies initially neat, and then a second that we have added ice, it eliminates a few of those flavours off, but it then enhances a few of those others. So what you've just described then by adding the water, it has definitely lifted up quite a lot of those notes.
Well, so chemically, when alcohol's above 37% by volume, it actually numbs your mouth. So everything we've had is 43 or 45. And so it's just the high alcohol content. Now all we've done is just dial it down. That opens up the oils, and so it really changes the expression. And that's what we always say to people. We're not, we are the distillers, but it's not about doing what you're supposed to do. It's about doing what's right for you. There's the trip we went over to Scotland. We met Colin Scott. He's the master blender for the Shivers inventory. So Shivers Brothers, so Ballantynes and everything. He was standing there drinking at Glenlivet Nadura with lemon, lime and soda. The next night he was having a Scotch and Coke. And so I think we follow that theory that if it's not the right whiskey for you, then try and change it. Whether that's dialing it down or adding something to it. That's it's a modern drink. It's not your old man's drink anymore. It's actually... so we sell nearly half of our whiskey goes to females. So there you go. Boom. Changed totally. And partly design. So our design of the tasting room is to be gender neutral. Like it's not about tweed and old man smoking jackets anymore. It's about, it's a funky drink and it's got a life of its own. It's interesting. And so we encourage people to play with whiskey. And we're about to release our first heavily peated whiskey. We bottled it at 66.23%. And it's designed, it's in a pack, and that pack has not only the full cask strength bottle, it has the pure H2O, it has the measuring cylinder, it has the graph, it has all the bits you need to change the whiskey. So you can have it at 66 or you can dial it down to 45 or anywhere in between. And so it's a lot of fun. But you would swear black and blue that if you have the same whiskey at 60 or 45, it's not the same. Yeah. It's totally different. So that's part of this experience. So.
No, that's a good point, and it's what I really like about whiskey is that you just get such a wide variety of flavours, tastes, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, I mean, you when you're young, you just think of it as just something to mix with Coke or something. But now, yeah, you do get to appreciate the different flavours, smells that come out of it.
And Jono, if you want to put it with some Coke after you bought it, it's okay. No, we don't care. Did I say after you bought it?
For me, that one, the sweet peat, it seems a lot more creamy. I think it's listed on your notes there, but definitely it tastes more creamy than the other drinks as well. It's straight off the bat for me, that one. I enjoy it again. But yeah, that's something different about that drink compared to the others. Is there a bit of a science behind that, or how did that come about?
Oh, absolutely, Ross. So basically, like I said before, we're extracting chemical components by their vaporising temperature. Okay, so all different components have different weights in chemistry. So what we find when we're doing a spirit run, the first component is your 4 shots, so that's methanol. And so once we've got high meth and methanol, all that stuff, we're into a range of chemicals we're separating. So, for example, peat is what makes the flavour, but in order to lift the peat molecules, it's much, much later in the run. So as the pot gets hotter, we're lifting heavier molecules, and that's including peat. But in order to get the peat in, we then have to receive a lot of the fats and oils as well with it. So they're called cuts. We often get asked, are we high or low cuts? Well, you've had 3 different whiskies with different cuts. So the different percentages we finish at, some have more fat and oils, and some have more of the ethanol. So so that's why that last one was super creamy, because it's actually got a thicker contribution from the congeners, fats and oils.
So would that be a later cut, would it?
Yep,
that's
a later cut,
okay.
yeah.
Right.
And quite a low cut, to be honest. So we don't talk about tight cuts here because people think that's great whiskey. It's different. So it depends what you're trying to achieve with your whiskey.
Did you say that you do them in a particular order, your whiskies, before?
It's a sequence, yeah,
sequence,
exactly.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. One dependent on the other one, but we won't get into that right
No,
now.
too technical. That's all right.
And across the 4 that we're having here today, is there a specific one that screams out to you as your favourite? I know you alluded to the pure malt being one of your preferred.
Yeah, so yes and no. We always say we're moody. Humans are moody things.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit like you can make a coffee one day and it's amazing, and the next day it's not, and that's generally your mood or your... So a bit the same with the whiskey. So our problem is, of course, at home we don't necessarily have all the finished products, and so when you go... So Naomi last night said, could I have a pure malt 45? I went, Not quite. You can have something similar. And so we're always experimenting with various things and percentages and cask expressions. So we do change what we love and what we don't want that night. Luckily, we have a few spare bottles that we can chop and change with.
The bonuses of working in a distillery.
It's also a pitfall because we don't drink a lot, but you want to drink good stuff, and then you might have some type of ongoing sample you're trying, and it's not very nice or it's not finished yet. So, you might blow your one whiskey a night on something you didn't love, but you had to test it anyway. So, And the other day, the guys had me in the office, and we must have tried, 20 different whiskies, and it sounds sexy during a work day, but it's exhausting. It's properly tiring. So.
It's a research and development, so sign me up if you've got a spare seat.
R&D. Do you get to claim trips to like Scotland or whatever on tax or something?
We could. We just went to New Zealand skiing, and we had to go to Cardrona Distillery, so you can write off a small amount of tax on that, of course. Yeah.
Yep.
But being ex-finance, we understand the rules, so we wouldn't get away with it.
How did you enjoy travelling to another distillery, especially in a different country, and just sort of seeing their processes and understanding, where they're at in the scale and how they're sort of looking to the future as well? And, obviously they're sort of parallels with yourselves, but, they're not quite competitors. They're more friends than anything, I imagine. But, did you enjoy that sort of trip, and did you learn anything while you were there?
Absolutely. Everywhere you go. So we're a bit different to a lot of distilleries. So I'd say we didn't ever have a champion. We didn't go out and find someone and say, look, give us a hand. We did it all ourselves. So we created our own style profile. Not to say we didn't ask questions, but we, in mentoring sense, we kind of did it ourselves. But the more you know, the more you realise what you don't know. Classic example. So, going to Cardrona overseas, they looked after us like you couldn't imagine. It was the best day ever. And the kid was snowing, so the kids are outside, soaking wet, had a ball. We were inside warm, drinking whiskey, so that's my preferred adult. But so we gain something from everywhere we go now, and it's just little bits. So Cardrona gave us some amazing ideas. I was speaking to Patrick Maguire from Sullivan's the other day. Massive ideas. And I think the most important thing here is we're all trying to work towards the same thing. Even whether it's New Zealand or here, we're trying to create something that didn't exist. That's what we love about this. It's inspiring. We know all the original heads of the industry, whether it's the KCO, Reams or Bill Larkson. We all got on really well. The whole industry gets on really well because we're trying to create this new thing. And I think it's working because we've now got the major chains seeking Australian whiskey, high quality, consistent, price-driven whiskies, hence we're all good mates because we're all trying to work together to do that. And so I love going to other distilleries, especially getting swappy bottles. It's fantastic.
Do you find the other Australian distilleries in particular, they have a similar process where obviously the science background that Naomi's got as well, have they got a similar aspect with their employees where they might have, I suppose a certain degree of scientific aspect about them as well? Or is it more passionate that these people...
I'd say most are passion-driven.
Yep.
Most Australian distilleries are quite small, and so it's a ma and pa kind of company, and that's great. And that they're the guys that create whiskies that are generally variable. So they source one musket barrel, one port, and that's very cool. And they have their tribal following, and that's fantastic. I think the bigger distilleries like us all have you have to have some degree of science, chemistry to it, because we always learn stuff. We learn a lot probably a year ago about calcium oxalate. Didn't know about that one. But that essentially in higher strength whiskey can create a crystal-like structure in the bottom of it once it's bottled.
Wow.
So you need to be able to find a solution to that. You need to be able to talk to chemists and scientists, and that was a simple example, but there's always things that need to be developed, and so we're singular in focus here, so we only make single malt things, so single malt whiskey primarily, and that's, but if you then range out into gins or vodkas or whatever else, then of course it's more science and more variables.
And that's Is that something that's ever on the cards to expand into those other spirits, or
No comment, Your Honour. No, it's so I was quite specific. I said we're singular in focus. We only make things from single malt. So whether there's derivatives we might go into. But yeah, there's other product lines that contain single malt that we're kind of pursuing, developing at the moment. But it's about whether you can be competitive. So everything you do here has to have a business case. It can't just be geez, that's a good idea, because they cost a lot of money. So, we say at the moment it costs us $26,000 to turn the still on. So that's 4 days of distilling. So you can't play with that sort of money. Some people could, I'm sure. But for us, we have to fund that. So you can... That's why the test bed was so important to create the recipes, the process. So when we turn this on, we weren't tipping the first few batches down the drain. It's got to be done on a commercial scale.
Yep. And that's hence where you're using the smaller barrels as well to try and utilise an alternate option rather than sitting there barrelling up everything, hoping for the best. You can get the right structures set up for those smaller barrels as well. So it was all batch driven. Yep.
So we knew how many. Initially, we were doing it. We were filling 8 barrels in a run. We do a bit more than that now, but that was the batch size. But the small barrels, no, more around the efficiency you get out of them. So you can't go too small because each barrel doesn't. It's a 20 litre barrel only contains about 38 bottles, so it's not viable. The 100 litre barrels contain about 150, and then the 300 litres about 500, 550. So definitely you've got to get into the larger format. But the 100 litre barrels are a good compromise. They're about 3.5, 4.5 odd years old when we bottle them, and they're massive. They're beautiful whiskies. It would take another couple of years in the bigger barrels. So it's getting to market, which we now only first fill 300 or 250 to 300 litre barrels.
Okay.
It's such a juggling act to create something that's so consistent and have the variables of the barrels, the aging processes. You just switch on the still there, and it's going to cost the money. That before you even start. So you've got to be accurate and efficient. There's so many little balances there that you need to get right, and it's such a tricky sort of thing to do. But you seem to have really come into your own here, like now just being around the distillery and seeing the production that you've got set up and the barrels that are here sitting, and it's just excellent to sort of see that you're on the right track. I mean, well, not so much on the right track, but you're definitely hitting the right things as you're doing it, and it gives you that inspiration to try push the boundary on this one and try something else here, and you've got that option there with those smaller barrels that you can do that. So we're looking for some excellent things to come from this as well. There's going to be some I'm sure you've got some stuff in the works that we don't know about yet, but we're looking forward to seeing that down the track, no doubt.
Yeah, thanks. It's but we also don't want to be known as a house that creates so many different product lines. So on a normal day we have 10 bottles, so 10 different whiskies, but some of them are the same but at different strengths. At Christmas time we have our Distillers Select, so there's 11. And then we win an award, so we bring it up. So you can get to this point where people go, I'm so confused. But we specifically designed our product lines around a palate, but also around a process. So we knew we needed both major chains and independents on board. And that's really significant. So what that means is you've got to have product lines that we can replicate, that are consistent, and we can produce a lot of it. But if we are in the majors, then the independents don't want it, because why would we bother? So we have the other line that then is more unique and different but consistent, and that goes off to the independents and the small sort of whiskey houses. So it's a lot of design in how we designed the concept of the whiskies.
Yep, and definitely. And you were mentioning to us before you've got a few of your expression ranges. You want to divulge a bit on them?
Oh, look, we sell a lot of cask expressions. That basically is when we have our, let's say our best 900 standard whiskey, and it's fully ready, full cask strength. Normally it's 68 to 70% alcohol. And then if it's that good, we'll often go into another barrel, sort of second maturation, and that's generally always been beer barrels. And so we'll pick up some of the best breweries in Australia, and they'll loan us their barrels, or we loan them our barrels and they give them back after they've used them for maybe 1 or 2 years. And so I think I was showing you the Hop Nation Kalashnikov barrel. That is just amazing. It's been there for 9 months on a secondary maturation, and it's picked up all those beer notes, and it's just super creamy. We've done collaborations with Jetty Road, Dainton's, Mornington, Tar Barrel. So all these breweries, that's a great synergy. And then we then swap barrels back and it keeps going. So it's a good system. But our cask expression range, I guess, can be some of my favourite as well. We produced one that was an accident. Not an accident, but it was a Russian Imperial Stout barrel. And then as soon as we put the whiskey in, I kind of wrote it off. I mean, I don't think that's going to be very good. And then a new staff member started, and he said, "What's this?" I said, "Oh, don't worry, it's junk." But he bought me a sample of a whiskey the same day and said, "Try this." And I went, "That is incredible." This was 2.5 years afterwards, and the whiskey had become this beast. We called it the Dark Russian. It was totally black whiskey, and it was sensational. So,
wow.
Yeah, we only had something like 70 or 80 bottles, and it went very quickly.
Yeah.
But it was divine. So there's lots of things happen in that top shelf tasting, that different, unique specialty range.
And just a quick question as well. Where did Chief Son sort of currently play in the land of whiskey in a sense of, say, you'd probably be familiar with people like the Whiskey Club that are out there as well, where they've got quite a large database as well. Does Chief Son play outside the realms of retail? Is there other areas that you're sort of working with to try and grow your brand even further as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So we sell a lot overseas. So when I say a lot, we're talking pallet loads at a time kind of thing. So that's really helpful for a cash flow point of view. And there's no excise or GST, so that's quite helpful. We do it. So we've sold some direct barrels, whether that's to Singapore or to the UK, and they take the whole lot. So they're the independent bottlers, and they love our whiskies because they're super unique and different. You mentioned, Bert, Casey, down in the Whiskey Club, and they want our whiskey. But what happened 4 or 5 years ago, we spoke and they said, "Yeah, we need 6,000 bottles." We went, "Oh, that's a lot of whiskey when you're starting out." So we went back to him and said, "We're ready to go." And he went, "Yeah, the database has got a bit bigger now. We need something like 25,000 bottles." We went, So that's not where we want to play. I mean, we'd love to play there, but that would be a significant
clean
part
out.
of clean us out a bit.
Yeah.
But they also, all those clubs, whether it's Single Malt Whiskey Club or all those guys, they do parallel sales. So there's the subscription stuff, and then there's this amazing whiskey. So we often slot into that. I know the Single Malt Whiskey Club have bought one of our family reserve barrels, but there's endless things to do. You just have to have the staff, the sales, the staff to actually prosecute it. So we do a lot of defence stuff. So as a veteran, that's, you've got a network there as well. So we did Artillery 150 last year. So Artillery in Australia turned 150 years old. So we did the pack for that, which was easy to win because I just told them, my Major General mates, that's what's going to happen. And they, so that was cool. We do a bit of police stuff, ambos. So that customisation aspect is really, I call them funnels. It's not the right word, but we have lots of different funnels that are feeding money into the system.
Excellent.
And we're pretty chuffed. We're a bit over 3 years in and we're cash flow positive. So I didn't expect that to happen so quickly. But that raised the point I was talking about before. I think every Australian should be proud of anything made in Australia. And initially the concept might be it's a bit more expensive. In this case, it's more expensive because of what we've done to it. So not the capital cost but it's about, we're trying to create something distinctively us. And the more you support any craft production, the bigger we can get, and so it's a cycle, and hence we can make it more affordable if we're getting more support. So it's an important aspect we're trying to work on is being dominant in Australia. We want to walk into a major chain, and like you see the wine. The wine, you walk in and it's all Australian wine. Down the end you've got a bit of Canadian, a bit of Californian and French and German. We wanted that to happen in the Australian spirit sector as well. You walk in there and you go, oh, there's a bit of something down the end there, but otherwise it's all Australian. And we should be able to do that. There's every spirit known to man now produced in Australia, including Argaves and tequila kind of stuff. It's just, so we can do all that here, and a bit like our wine, we can kind of do it better than most people. So Australians just need to keep supporting us, and we grow into what they need us to be.
Well, I think I saw the other week that Australia now has more whiskey distilleries than any other country in the world. Not necessarily at the point of selling yet, but there's that many out there producing, getting ready to kind of sell it.
Yeah, I think per capita we might, but most distilleries are very small, and so that's fun. But strategically, we think you need to be minimum of this size to go forward, because or be little and be regional. So you might be at somewhere fun that everyone goes to, and you
service that area.
Whether that's Port Arthur or Coral, they've got a great place because it's a destination. But in terms of mainland distilleries, you need to be big enough to export, to sell to the majors, and to be a venue and destination for people. And I think in between those two is struggle town. If you can't employ minimum of 11, ideally 22 people, you're struggling to actually sell enough whiskey, or you don't have the consistency that. So it's a puzzle, that's for sure.
And you mentioned as well before that the more that I suppose customers and supporters of whiskey start investing in companies like yourselves as well in regards to purchasing the product, but it's same for most of the distilleries too. It grows the industry so much more quicker if everyone's on board to do that as well.
People say to us, you must hate the big distilleries, the really big Australian ones, and it's actually completely opposite. We love the big distilleries because they've got, whether they're owned internationally or big corporations, they've got the marketing dollar. So they throw the money around, which blows the trumpet, and
helps you guys.
If you're in Victoria, you know that you hear the big trumpet and people start looking. And so it's a great system where everyone benefits from it.
Most definitely, mate. Most definitely. So I think we'll Roscoe and Jono and myself. We usually like to do this where we do a bit of a whip around in regards to ratings and that sort of stuff. But instead of ratings, because I believe these are all a 10 in my book anyway, and there's no favouritism at all. They were absolutely fantastic. But there's always going to be a favourite amongst the four of these. So, Roscoe, out of the four, which one would you say was your favourite, mate?
The malty one was brilliant. It was different, the third one we had. But I think that's Sweet Pete for me.
Sweet Pete for you?
That's the bottle I'll be buying on the way out the door.
Yep.
I'm on the fence between those two myself. I mean, they were both great in their own unique ways, and really struggling to pick one out of the two.
you better get the malty one since we're neighbours, Jono, and we can go have a drink every now and again, and that'll be the right way to do it, I think.
That sounds smart.
I tend to agree with you, Johnny, on that. Pure malt one, absolutely phenomenal. Picking up on that banana flavour straight away was just, it's blown my mind to get that out of a whiskey. But honestly, the tannist, especially for price point of what it sits at the moment, I'm just seeing on here, so it's around about 115 as well. You get
700 mils. Let's comment on that.
Yeah, yes, 700 mil, 43%er as well. That's an exceptionally good price for what that quality of that drink actually delivers as well. And I think you did allude to that was, we don't say entry level, we try and say more of an intro into your brands.
Well, Naomi said something beautiful, and I can't remember what it was. If you're going to ask me, though, today, I really enjoyed the standard.
The standard?
To me, as soon as I drank it, I went, wow, that's amazing.
Yep.
And it just sounded dumb, but I do that every morning. I walk into the distillery floor here, and I go, wow. I think, that's weird. I've been doing it for 8 years now, but it's an amazing place to work. It's magic. And we're all passionate, on board. So imagine that every day you go into your staff and they love being here.
And you can see that passion. The second that we walked in the door, what did we see? We saw the barrels through the door. We smelled that really rich smell straight in the air. We saw some or people being toured around and that sort of thing, having their tastings. But we saw your passion when you were standing up there. It resonated straight away, and you can see it in what you're producing out of these whiskies. So congratulations again with these, Stuart. You've done a great job.
Thank you. I thought you saw chaos when you came in. But
there was a few people waiting.
There was a dog in here.
Wondering whether or not they were getting a tour or whatnot. And today might have been a little bit more on the chaotic scale because they prepared their time for us to let us come down and do a little podcast session as well. So we're very grateful for that. But Not in saying that, it's just like a wonderful place. And I was just going to ask a question briefly, really quickly about, you're giving up your time today on a Saturday to do a tour. And is that something that you guys run often? Can you get more people in the door here doing the tours, or are you literally booked out because you guys are that busy, you stretch yourselves sort of running and managing everything else? And how does that work?
Yeah, we work pretty hard. But we have 3 little kids as well, so we kind of juggle a lot. We're open here 6 days a week. They're not Sundays. We just decided Sundays are too hard, particularly because everyone wants to come after lunch, after a big relaxed sleep in, and it's just chaotic. So 6 days a week, tasting rooms open, but we do tours on Fridays and Saturdays, and they're generally booked out. Although, two problems at the moment. We've got a backlog from the last 18 months where people are still trying to book in, and we're getting a lot of sick people ringing in saying, I've got COVID or whatever. So, but the tours are actually probably the most fun thing, because all I've got to do is just the tours. I don't have to deal with anything. So it's that's where
machinery and setting up and this and that and cleaning and all that sort of stuff.
And it's great fun. And so, I mean, for us, the tasting room is hugely profitable. So we love people coming down, people showing people around. And the last group you saw come in, they weren't booked, but they begged for a tour. So okay, here we go. So we're pretty adaptable. But it's great to have people back now doing tours and tastings in the distillery.
And I'll let you also round us out with a bit of a final plug as well, Stuart, just in regards to the business and where you're located, where everyone can find you, all that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah, you need to come here. Damn good whiskey. So we're down in Somerville. So the address is Factory 25, number 50, Guelph Street, GUELPH Street, Somerville. Kind of in the back industrial area. That's where we kind of are at the moment. Open 6 days a week. We have... Our aim is to get everyone to buy something, and so you can buy a little bottle of whiskey for $35, or you can spend as much as your bank account or more. We're happy with credit cards. But there's a lot of whiskey here to try, and it's not just enthusiasts. And if you're not a whiskey drinker, you need to come and become a whiskey drinker. Not from the drinking. It's like we say, you don't drink whiskey, you actually enjoy it. And our whiskies aren't what you'd expect. They're beautiful single malt whiskies. They're easy to drink, so when we get people coming and saying I'm not a whiskey drinker, they will generally leave with a bottle, because that's our mission. So
it's just the whole experience here as well. We're in amongst the barrels down here now, and we're sitting behind the still, and you're talking to the owner, and these are the people that have the knowledge about the business, but the product too. So if they're going to give up their time to share it with you, and you can get down here for a tour, and you really, it's just a win-win. They're going to benefit from you coming in the door and telling your mates about this experience, and you're going to benefit yourself from just visiting and understanding and learning, and you take that on and share it again. So,
thanks, Ross. That's awesome.
That's fantastic. And there's one last little plug. If you love your merch as well, they've got some great bit of merch down here too.
It's all about the beanie.
The beanie.
Oh, seriously, it's taken us 7 years to get a beanie.
Wow.
We're probably the reverse distillery. Normally, the first thing people do is go and make merch. This was the last thing we did. There you go.
Little plug.
But it's last thing we did. So Naomi got to the point where so much hard work, and she said, I just want a T-shirt. So, but the beanie, it's been a long way. They arrived on Monday. So we are all chuffed to have our little beanies.
Yeah, definitely need them on a day like today, don't you?
Beanies, caps, T-shirts. There's a lot of different types of glasses. Great crystalware here, and obviously lots of whiskey. So yeah, we deal in it all.
Fantastic. Well, that covers off our amazing interview here with Stuart and Naomi, the head distillers and owners of Chief Sun Distillery in Somerville. Stay tuned, and we'll catch you on the next pod. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Wowee. What an amazing interview that was. Absolutely fantastic to hear all the great aspects of why their whiskey is what it is today and why it's so special. The history, everything they're putting into it, the passion as well. You could feel that from Stuart Naomi's voice as well. There's just a great deal of passion that they're throwing into this whiskey, and I would recommend highly anyone out there that's looking for something to do on a weekend, or even something to put in the old liquor cabinet. This is a great drop for you, and you will not be disappointed. And that pretty much wraps everything up for this episode. So we will catch you next time. This is Having a Crack with Big Mac, Roscoe, and Jono. Take it easy.